Welcome to this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series. We are grateful to be bringing you information about visionary solutions for the planet and regenerative community development. We are a nonprofit organization that operates primarily on contributions from our Patreon members and donations. If you appreciate the information shared in these discussions, please consider becoming a Local Earth Patreon member. A link to the membership information is shared in the description below. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Solar Energy Alliance. There is a link in the description below for a free solar proposal for your home and information about how to become a partner or ambassador with the Alliance. We now invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series. Thank you. All right, welcome everybody to this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series, The Visionary Solutions. My name is Joshua Alvord, and our featured guest today is Rieki Cordon. Welcome, brother.
Welcome. Fun to be here.
Such an honor to have you in this discussion, and have been really inspired the last several weeks, month or so, as I've been learning about seeds and all of the amazing projects that you are working on. So it's a real honor to be talking with you.
Thanks. I don't necessarily know if I'm working on it. I like to think that I'm playing.
Playing on it. Cool. Even better. So Rieki is dedicated to regeneration in all its forms, with a passion for personal transformation and evolution, and how this plays into cultivating successful and thriving communities. He's focused on whole systems evolution and excited about the current modern renaissance we are living in. So let's jump into it from here. We're focusing on solutions to the biggest challenges we're facing on the planet today. And it feels like the projects that you are working on are providing amazing solutions to this. So let's just hop in, and you can give a little overview and update to what it is that you're working on.
Yeah. There you go. Co-creating. That's definitely our philosophy too, is that, humanity is facing a series of challenges, crises, however you want to frame them. And what they're asking us to do is no less than whole systems transformation, because our crises start at the foundation of our systems, how our societies are actually set up, how our civilizations are set up. For example, the foundation of our fiat monetary system requires that we continually and endlessly grow on a finite planet just to maintain itself. So we have this condition that we're constantly transforming our natural world into money just to maintain the system as it is, not even to make it better. So we look at this condition and we say, well, where do we actually begin to truly address these problems? And that's where seeds came to be, as an attempt and an offer to actually address some of these crises from their foundations. And that's why we say we're living in the modern renaissance, because there's this explosion of tools and capability that we're experiencing right now that's actually giving us the capability to create and easily create alternative societies. So blockchain is giving us an ability to create decentralized financial systems. And then on top of that, we can create decentralized governance systems. So this is giving us, alternative tools that we can use to remodel how humans organize on a global and mass level.
And I'm going to hop in for 1 second. And just in case some of the viewers and listeners aren't familiar with seeds at all, you want to give a 2-sentence kind of overview of just what it is, and then we can get way deeper into it.
Yeah. So 2 sentences, seeds is a regenerative financial and governance system. So you can think of it on a very, very basic level. It's kind of like PayPal, but without fees, and that finances regeneration. To take a little bit higher view, central banks across our planet made about 12 trillion US dollars worth of currency in the last decade. And to get an idea of how much 12 trillion is, the UN said that we could end world hunger with 50 billion US dollars. Some even said 30 billion. So we could have ended world hunger anywhere from 400 to like 200 and something times over with the amount of money that we made. Some estimates that are talking about planting the 2 trillion trees needed to sequester enough carbon to offset our climate crisis are talking about like $120 billion to do that. So we could have done that 100 times over. So the amount of money that humanity collectively made in this last decade is enormous, and none of this money went towards regenerative projects. This money wasn't directed by the people who are actually part of these systems. It was controlled and dictated by a handful of people for myopic self-interests. So that's where we start off, is saying, how do we create a financial system that acts a similar way, but actually drives value towards the crises that we're experiencing today, and lets the humans who are part of these systems control it and govern it and have a say in how they're working and get some of the benefit from being part of these systems.
And I sometimes have wondered how to go about either in a conversation with two people or like a presentation. And I've found numerous YouTube videos that you trace back kind of like the history of the dollar bill and how that was created, initially being almost like a receipt for grain in certain cultures. And it actually represented something useful for the community. And, whether or not we were using pine cones or seashells or receipts for grain, whatever that mechanism of exchange was, to me, it all seems like a great system of just, energetic exchange. So you don't need to carry 20 chickens down the road to the guy who's making the shoes. But where it gets interesting is that banker in the community, as if there's a role in the community that's just to store the seashells or the pine cones or whatever the currency is, and, distribute them throughout. Like, that's a role, and that banker playing the role in the community should get some of those seashells and pine cones for that work. But as soon as you get into the fractional reserve kind of based banking, and where the bank and those bankers are loaning other people in the community's energy out at interest, and like they haven't been actually doing any physical work in the community, and then relending that, and like you just start to see like where the 99 and the 1% have, the system's completely designed that way. So it's really, like, I think, as you've said, like, it's such a source. You can't just put band-aids on all of like the things that are wrong in society if like you're not addressing the source issues of how we create value in our economic systems, and then the governance of how that is allocated and distributed throughout a community or a society. And so it feels, it's really beautiful that I feel like you and the group of people that you're working with on Seeds and Hypha are like one of the most some of the most visionary people that are really addressing those root causes, and have been working, I think, for maybe 3 or 4 years to create these systems, platform solutions. Like, how long have you been kind of in the process of it?
Yeah, so it's been almost 4 years now since the concept originally came and the protocol design actually started happening. And it's been about 2 years of actual coding and building. So it's been a long time coming, and there's a lot that actually goes into this. When you're talking about automating a financial and governance system, it's an incredible amount of detail that needs to go into that. And I wanted to touch a little bit on, you mentioned banks and how they used to, and they do play a role. So first, there's a couple points. The fiction that we used to ever barter with goods and services anyway is just that, a fiction. Most communities throughout most of humanity offered off of a gift culture. So just like we do in our families, like if we had 10 chickens and that guy had 5 boots, that guy just gave us boots if we needed them, and we gave him a chicken if we wanted one. Like, we didn't actually feel the need to keep account. We only started really keeping account when we were dealing with untrusted parties. So that's where we see currency first coming in, is when, you know, tribes actually started interacting with each other, and we're like, ooh, they've got some interesting trinkets there, and we want to like trade with them, but we're usually warfaring, so we have to like have some type of energy exchange. So that's actually where currency started in some cases, but in other cases it was started by empires that wanted to be able to finance their militaries. So anyway, there was just never a culture ever that was doing barter and thought, how do we make this more efficient? Because they didn't ever need to, and this never existed. So there's some, you know, fantasies that economics speak of, that they want to like repaint history without any evidence. The other aspect is, you know, bankers holding our value today. A lot of times they're literally making value up. When a bank gives you a loan, they're not loaning out someone else's money to you. They're literally creating it out of thin air and then loaning it to you. So what's also doing is it's inflating the money supply. So they're putting more money into circulation when this happens. So the value of everyone's money goes down. So that's essentially what they're doing, is they're robbing literally everyone in order to make interest off of that, in a way. But what's really cool about this, you know, renaissance, is that we can automate this process away. So yes, bankers play a role, but we don't actually need an institution or even a human to fulfill the role that they're playing. We could have code fulfill it. And that code doesn't feel like it needs a cut. We can create it one time and that code could take no cut at all. And now it can, you know, perform that function without taking a fee or feeling like it needs to extract wealth from the people who are engaging with it. And that's something that's really powerful, is all of the institutions we have today that are just playing these extractive middlemen, we can remove all of them, replace them with code so that they don't, you know, need to extract value in order to maintain themselves.
So if I'm understanding correctly, it feels like Seeds has been developed and created on the Holochain, right?
No, not quite.
No. So what's the difference between blockchain and Holochain, and how do those two dance or play?
Yeah, I'm not the best one to answer that, but Holochain, in their terminology, is agent-centric. So they give each node essentially has all their information, and they get to choose who they interact with. It doesn't have one unified, you know, global ledger, so to speak. And that's what blockchain's all about, is creating a global unified ledger. So one source of truth, why Holochain has all these subjective truths that they interplay with each other. So I guess that's how I would differentiate the two, is Holochain is about subjective truth, but still finding truth, while blockchain is about objective truth.
And is Seeds using both of them, or is it on one platform other than the other?
Sure. We would love to interplay with Holochain more. It's just in the 4 years that we've been building this, Holochain has just been theoretical, and it wasn't quite to the point that the platforms we're using are. So we want to start using Holochain a lot more, especially when it comes to setting up websites and portals and applications, because I think that's something that is really powerful on the Holochain side, is how to set up this app that's not even needing the current internet anymore. So it just is more robust that way. That's a whole other conversation, but I think Holochain's great. We're actually on Telos, which is a fork of EOS. So I don't know if that means anything to anyone, but it's a really fast, governance-focused blockchain. And we decided we needed that, global unified ledger, because we're trying to automate a financial system that really needs to have an objective source of truth to determine how much currency we're going to grow, who's getting what, and all these things.
And you shared with me when we were in a prior discussion that to create, a decentralized economic system, that the group of people coming together to build it had to be somewhat decentralized. So you created, is that kind of how Hypha formed, is the group that was developing Seeds? And so those two, even the organizational structure of how it was created, to me, is really fascinating. It's very different than like the CEO of some company that has employees hired them to develop this thing. It feels like a very co-creative, collaborative group that's come and is creating with a whole new form of consciousness. It seems as though.
Yeah. So I love this saying, and it was attributed to the Buddha, but I doubt he said it. But he was talking about enlightenment, and that in future times, the next form of enlightenment will be a group of people coming together for a shared purpose. So while the Buddha himself as an individual was able to become, quote, enlightened, he was, speaking to a very near future where it would require groups to achieve the same. So that's what's, a guiding philosophy behind the group of people that are helping build seeds. Is not so much that we're just building these tools, but we're evolving ourselves, and that we're coming together to have this like group mind, this group consciousness that could achieve way more than it could, with other typical structures. But yeah, anyway, the point is we're building seeds, this decentralized financial and governance system, and we're getting into it and realizing we needed to set up some form of organization. And it very quickly occurred to us that if the organization we set up to build seeds was this centralized organization, then it becomes, one, a point of failure, two, a point of attack. And you can't really have a decentralized system if the people building it are centralized, right? So that quickly got us into like, okay, so what's the minimal viable tool set that we can build to decentralize ourselves so that even, we can offer ourselves in a more easily put way. We wanted the community at large to be able to come to this and be able to collaborate and get a part of the share as well. We wanted there to be really no boundaries or borders that are very, strong in order to prevent other people from being able to participate and get value and have their voices heard, and to do it in a way where no one individual or even handful of individuals could prevent that from occurring. So even us, we didn't want us to even be able to have an ability to stop this. And that's so critically important, especially given the scale that we're working on, because some people might feel a little bit threatened by the systems we're building. We really hope that's not the case. We would prefer that, people that are in power today can realize that we're facing these global crises and that we need to do something drastic to actually address it. So, but just in case there are some people out there who don't want this to continue on, we needed to make sure that there wasn't a point where they can come and say, hey, shut it down. Hey, you need to stop it. And if there was a centralized company for them to come and attack, then they could, do that. So we wanted to make sure that, even we couldn't shut it down, or that there's no individual that had control over it. So that was kind of the necessity that born Hypha. And for people listening, what Hypha is there's mycelial network, which is the fungal network that connects a forest. One of the hairs on that network that connects everything is called a Hypha. So we designed Hypha to be more like an organization that helps connect everything, and then it's the one that helps all the many form this mesh network that delivers information and value across a healthy ecosystem.
Beautiful. Taking some notes as we're talking.
That was a little bit dense, but
yeah. Well, no, it's great. I mean, there's so much in this conversation and so many directions it can take. One present thing right now is like, so the little bit that I've understood and learned about how Bitcoin was created, the value, how value is created in that system, the mystery of like, was it one person that created or a group of people? And that still seems to be a mystery. Nobody really knows. And loved like how you're sharing like the creation of seeds is that eventually it takes on a life of its own that is not centralized, that no one person or group really can shut down. And so being really important that all the correct parts of DNA are in place before it starts to replicate is important. But I'm sure you all have been very mindful of that. And so, yeah, I guess the how value is created in a system of if you start to study the Federal Reserve and the fractional reserve-based banking system, you'll start to learn, as you said, it's just created out of thin air, ones and zeros in a computer. Like, I mean, there's nothing really tangible in society right now that is creating that value. And so, like Bitcoin, I know you can earn some value in that by mining it on different machines, and I've heard different things about how much energy that takes from a sustainability standpoint, like the power to run all that. And then you also shared with me, I think there's a limited amount of Bitcoin. So like that value, kind of the, how that affects the growth of the value. And I think what you said with seeds is, I mean, it's based in more regenerative principles of how nature works, is that kind of try to keep it a somewhat stable system, right? But I mean, that grows. Can you kind of parallel that of like how Bitcoin grows?
Sure. I want to compare. Yeah. Let me talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin, to start off, did some phenomenal things. It showed that we can build a decentralized financial system that doesn't require like individuals to control it. In fact, we don't even know who set it up. So that's a really powerful thing that it demonstrated. However, I think it had a lot of failings. One is tremendous energy use. So it's extraordinarily wasteful in how it sets up its consensus mechanism. Second, it's also extraordinarily wasteful on how it delivers value. So it created about $5 billion US, actually probably more at this point, in Bitcoin last year, and 3 billion of that went to pay electricity fees.
Wow.
So 3 billion of the value it created went to just electricity costs, which is enormous. The other 2 billion went to people who are running miners, which is basically this useless hardware that's just running code, running little algorithms that isn't producing much of anything other than heat and costing electricity. So how it delivered value was very short-sighted, in my opinion. Second, how it grew was also not effective for fiat currency or a medium exchange currency. It modeled its protocols after gold, which is why it uses terms like mining and why people are sometimes calling it digital gold, because it looks much more like gold. It's designed to look like gold, which means that there is a finite supply that will ever exist, and it has a fixed inflation rate, meaning that as mining's happening, it's coming in at a fixed rate regardless of how many people are actually using Bitcoin or needing it. So what happens is as demand changes for Bitcoin, as more people decide to start using it or less, we see this volatility in the price. That's what responds to changes in demand. And when the price is so volatile for an exchange asset, it becomes near useless. People don't want to like price their goods in Bitcoin because they might get half the value one week, then they'll get the next week. Yeah. So it became a very, its main use case as a form of medium exchange and a form of currency became almost nullified based on those designs. And then it kind of just took a backseat as this, speculation vehicle, something to invest in. And the primary drive behind Bitcoin is just to hold it, not necessarily use it. You don't really hear anyone say like, hey, go get your coffee shop accepting Bitcoin. What they say is buy Bitcoin, lock it up in your hard drive, and bury it underground. Just you don't actually lock it in your hard drive. Anyway, point is how Seeds is a lot different is it actually tracks the growth and the demand for the currency. So as more people are joining this economy and are requiring more seeds, what it does is it just creates more currency for that new demand. So what we've created is a currency that's value stable. So it's growing new currency to meet new demand. So supply is fluctuating to meet demand, meaning the value remains more stable. And what's really powerful about this is that fiat currency or national currencies are losing anywhere from 3 to 12% of their purchasing power year over year. So if they were doing a similar protocol where they're only growing currency to meet new demand, we wouldn't be losing any of our purchasing power year over year. It would remain stable. So what Seeds is actually trying to be the most stable currency that we have today, because currently there's no asset that is algorithmically grown based off of supply and demand. And where it gets really, really interesting and how we become regenerative is how we deliver this new currency. So we don't have any of the costs associated with Bitcoin to run our blockchain. In fact, just keeping a long story short, it's basically, it would be less than 0.1% of our total value used to maintain the actual blockchain itself. So we actually get to be very discerning in how we deliver this additional value. And this is where it becomes regenerative, because part of it goes out to all the organizations who are part of Seeds, and how much they get is determined on how regenerative they are. and also how much they're actually helping the ecosystem grow, how many new people they're bringing in. So what we've done is we've programmed in people, planet, profit, like the triple bottom line. And we say, organizations, how much are you serving the planet? How much are you serving the community with tools and ability for access and all these things? And how much are you, serving the economy? And we look at those three factors and we give them a score. And based on that score is how much of this new currency they get. So what we've done is we've created a financial incentive to do good things for the planet. Second is money goes out to all the people on the network using a similar score. I call it proof of contributions. Like the more you're using it, the more people you bring in, and all these other metrics of how much are you actually contributing to the environment at large determines how much of this new currency you get. And this is where we start getting into better than free, because there's no exchange fees to use the currency. Like if I transact it, it's completely free to do so. But the more I'm doing that, the more I'm contributing, and the more I'm contributing, the more of this new money I get. So now we have this better than free currency that doesn't cost you anything, but the more you use it, the more you get paid. And then the last half goes to global and community organizations for them to be able to distribute out however their communities decide. But 1/4 of those funds are reserved for regenerative grants. So for projects that are doing regeneration, this is a funding pool that they can go to directly to say like, hey, I'm setting up a local food system. Hey, we're transforming that empty plot into a community garden and to give out food for free, or we want to replant this native forest, clean up our rivers, etc. All these things that will never be profitable, shouldn't necessarily be profitable, but we still need to do. This will create a financial stream to actually fund those projects and let the communities themselves decide who and what to fund. And then another 1/4 goes to regenerative loans. So the same concept, but now for regenerative businesses. So maybe this is, industrial agriculture switching over to regenerative agriculture. They can go and request a loan to be able to do that from this pool of funding. And then the other half of those funds that communities are getting, they get to decide how they want to spend them. Maybe they're buying up collaborative goods together. They want to buy up a hotel and turn it into this, group Airbnb that they can all use for free or whatever. They get to choose how they want to spend these funds. And that's what's really powerful. It would almost be like the central banks, they made 12 trillion and they'd say, 4 trillion goes out to all of humanity as a form of UBI. Okay, another 4 trillion goes out to all the organizations who are part of this economy, thank you for serving the planet. Like, thank you for all of these things. And then the rest of the money, we're going to let humanity itself decide how it's spent. That would be a very powerful prospect and almost seem like, why isn't that already happening? Like, why don't we have a say? And that's what Seeds is offering. It's like, we're doing very similar financial system, but directing value towards the regeneration of our planet and giving the people themselves a direct say in how it's, evolved and governed.
And with an economic system, it feels like a lot of it is the belief or trust in a system, like that you're going to have a dollar bill that you're going to be able to give to somebody for a cup of coffee or a sandwich and get that exchange. And so with Seeds, do you have like any like actual like dollar bills in the system, like initially to spark the, okay, we're going to allocate a $10,000 grant to this organization for this. Is it currently met with any like dollar bills, or how do they relate at the beginning as you're building this ecosystem?
Sure. So Seeds is a free floating currency. So it doesn't hold any value parity with any other currency like the dollar. Second, there's nothing backing it. So we're not backed by US dollars either, or any other national currency for that matter. So how people would translate Seeds into national currency would just be at the day's exchange rate. So just like when you get euro, when you enter into the European economy, you translate your US dollars into euro. And then when you come to the States, you turn your euro into US dollar. So that'd be the idea, is when you're coming into the Seeds economy, you just transform your dollars, euros, whatever currency you're coming in with into Seeds, and vice versa when you want to leave. We actually, getting into backing, is that a topic you wanted to touch on?
Well, I'm just thinking of how, like, maybe we could focus it on some concepts of like regenerative community development, and we can just use some of what I'm working on with like Local Earth as kind of a case study for just like theoretical purposes, and try to like ground some of these concepts for myself. And I do love one of the talking points you said, like, what was it? What did you say? Hellenic, the Hellenic scales of our regenerative civilization. And so scales to me is a really important word of, like, I've been playing a lot with Dunbar's number for like the group size of how many people can maintain interpersonal relationships, really know one another, and working around some of the community designs, the village designs around that base fractal of about 150 people that are working together at that scale to grow a lot of their own food, and the community garden, you know, deal with a lot of their own waste through living machines or blackwater systems or composting toilets, generating their own renewable energy, and designing those scales, like even whether it's a solar array or, you know, hydro turbine, at that village-like scale of around 150 people. And then you can replicate that and fractal it out into more urban planning methodologies of, you know, you can have hundreds of these village-like neighborhoods that, so I mean, the concept scale, but so we're focusing really on that Dunbar's number of 150 people for that initial base unit. And so let's say we're going to look to, you know, create with permaculture principles from, you know, from ground zero, a piece of land, for one, observing it through a whole year, you know, observing all the natural patterns and the wind flows and the water flows before we even build a road or any human system, to make sure we're designing it in kind of whole systems regenerative principles. But we gotta start with that land. So let's say that land's $300,000, you know, and the, you know, the building material, just like how a grant from seeds, when it comes down to like, we need to purchase the land for, you know, $300,000, $100,000, whatever it is, how could the interplay between the current paradigm and economic system, where that landowner might not necessarily accept seeds yet, and so how do we start to like build these communities like from the ground up?
Sure. Ooh, a lot of different points.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
Yeah. First, just to address that, you know, exchange concept with seeds. We're absolutely needing there to be liquidity between, you know, the fiat world and the seeds world. So there's a point where we actually turn seeds more into a currency and away from an asset, and we're waiting until we have signs of that liquidity before we're doing it. So when you mentioned a grant, for anyone listening to this, is what's really powerful is Seeds is giving grants out to all the organizations and projects that are doing really powerful things for humanity. What we're saying is we're a regenerative financial system. There's already projects across the globe who are working towards regeneration. Let's give them a piece of this pie, and this is what connects us all together. So Local Earth, very well, I'm going to vote up for it, but we'll be getting a grant. And then what happens is in that first period of Seeds' life, the value of Seeds is intended to grow. So it's like basically every other cryptocurrency. The more people who use it, the more adoption it gets, the more demand there is, the higher the value will be. So we might come together and say, you know what, Local Earth, here's a $10,000 grant. But by the time, you know, a year from now, when that actually begins to start being liquid for you to be able to spend, because during that period, it's actually locked up. You know, it's in escrow, it's got your name on it, but you can't actually spend it yet.
For 1 year, right?
Well, until the go live happens. So go live is an event that's triggered by the citizens of Seeds as a whole. It's when they actually say, hey, we're ready to go live. And go live means economic protocols kick on, the escrow starts unleashing money, and blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
And what we're looking for is certain economic triggers of a robust economy before we click that button on.
Okay.
Because what we're looking for is to have enough adoption, so enough organizations on board, enough people on board, that when you get that currency, your drive isn't to turn it right back into fiat money. Your drive is to actually use it as a form of currency.
Okay.
And you need to have enough people to exchange with before that becomes real.
Yeah.
So that's the moment we're looking for, is we're giving all this value to people, and then we're saying, hey, by the time we turn this on, we actually want you to spend it like currency.
Gotcha.
So the best case scenario is you meet someone who, you know, understands that seeds is, one, growing in value, two, it's a system that has, you know, is fully transparent. I could see what's going on with it. You know, three, it's more regenerative and better for the planet, and four, it's easier to use and doesn't cost me any fees. So you can just tell the person who you're trying to buy land from all of these benefits. We have articles and videos that make it really easy, and say like, hey, would you accept this as a form of payment? You know, you're hedging against the US dollar. You're likely an investor anyway. You've got this land. And you notice that the US dollar economy is in a downturn right now. So what is it that you would like to put your money into? So you can make a simple argument like that, get them to accept seeds. But in the case they don't, there already exists pathways to turn seeds into fiat money. So just the exact same number of people who are coming in from the US dollar and euro systems into seeds, because they see the value of this, this could be met with people who are leaving seeds to, you know, get US dollars to buy their land with. But definitely the first step we want people taking is actually using it as their financial system, and they want people to accept it as that currency. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
And are you very familiar with Dom and Her, and like how I believe they have their own currency and kind of economic system that they've created within that kind of community, intentional community, small civilization there. Is there parallels to like how they've done anything? Are you very familiar with their economic system?
Yeah, and I think they've done some incredible things. And now I want to speak to your scale, because that was the other question you had. So we use this word holonic, which is these nested holes. The best example we have is our own human bodies. What we have is an organ, which is like this self-containing hole within the whole system that's our, you know, body. And that's something we want to work on, where we have these nested holes. We have these different organs that are using different currencies. So organs have different hormones and ways that they actually communicate within that organ that they use to then communicate with the rest of the body. You have red blood that actually communicates to the whole body and delivers information, value, and resources, etc., to all the organs. But organs themselves are these like nested holes that have these own forms of interacting within themselves. And that's actually what I would see as the most resilient system for our economic system as well, where each local community can have their own forms of currency for their medium exchange. And I don't think this should, and I think we would be pretty boring if we just made that look like money. What we could do is, there's one system like reputation, where each person in the community gets X number of reputation at the beginning of the month. They have to spend it or they lose it. And then how this reputation is delivered throughout the community, or sorry, not reputation, we would call it gratitude. So you get these gratitude points, and then you actually have to give this gratitude or you lose it. So we create this system where everyone's like looking to be thankful for other people. And then how much gratitude you get at the end of the month determines how much that translates into whatever, you know, medium of exchange currency that they're using. So either way, that was just one example of a multitude of examples that we can create that replace how we exchange value within a community. And what's really powerful is that we have a diversity of communities exploring these different ways of doing it, because now we're working with evolution. We're setting up a lot of different experiments where people are able to see what works for them, take some learnings, share it with all the other local communities, etc. So that's even part of Seed's roadmap is, yes, we're creating this Seeds currency that's meant to be this medium exchange, but an ideal, you know, medium term future for us is that each local community has their own value exchanges as well, and that Seeds then starts to become this intra community form of exchange. So just like before, where tribes, they had gift economies, they didn't need medium exchanges to connect with themselves, but when they ever met a different tribe, they needed this currency now all of a sudden to communicate with a different tribe. That's what Seeds could end up being. It's just like, how do communities talk to each other? But I really, really think that communities would have a really beautiful opportunity to create different forms of value exchange between them. And Seeds facilitates that. So the passport, the wallet, you know, the application that we're building will be able to store multiple different forms of tokens and currencies within it. And we want to encourage local communities to set up their own forms of value exchange. In the meantime, though, seeds is a great step, because what's also really powerful is the more each community uses in seeds, the more of that inflation of seeds they get. So it's actually better for their community to use it because they can get paid to use it. Either way, we would see both, and a very resilient, healthy system would have this global diversity going on that's helping us align to evolution.
I like how, because I shared with you a little bit. So with Local Earth and the communities that we have been working on, we've been talking about an internal currency energetic exchange mechanism of like the earth share. And
nice.
Working on like the concept of everybody contributes about 20 hours a week to village businesses, projects, cooperatively managed. Like maybe we have a farm, a building company, a cafe, and a retreat venue. Maybe these 4 to 6 things. Everybody works those 20 hours a week, but they don't get paid any dollar bills for it. Like their exchange is they get enough earth shares that enables them to have 3 meals a day at the community lodge cafe, and a place in the village to live, all of their electricity, their water, all basic needs, like everything for those 20 hours a week of contribution. Mm-hmm. And the earth share would be just our internal kind of economy for that exchange, and have gone pretty far down the wormhole of like how the value of that is created, and like based on the smallest unit of exchange of like not even a meal, but like even just like a beverage or something, of like what's 1 earth share worth, or and a lot of it relating to some of those just super basic needs of several meals a day and the roof over our head. And so it'll be fun to see how seeds for our example of Local Earth, and there's lots of different organizations creating their forms of communities, and so they, like you said, they might have their own kind of, their tribe has their medium of exchange, and seeds and the passport could kind of be the bloodstream, as you're talking about the different organs, like that helps interface between those different communities. Does that kind of make sense?
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
And we want to empower that. So yeah, you could use seeds as your medium of exchange, and we would encourage this too, to design different forms of financial tools. So even in our culture, we have a financial tool that looks like an equity. This is one that's meant to rise in value. So when you buy it, you hold on to it and you store value there. And then we have medium exchanges. So that's 2 basic ones. I mean, there's plenty more. So Earth Share could look like a medium exchange. It's meant to have stable value, and that's just something that you need to earn 20 every day in order to meet your basic needs. Or it could represent a fractional share ownership of the community. So as the community grows, the farm business gets more profitable, like more people join the community, houses get sexier looking, all these things, like the value of that Earth Share could be increasing. And then it does become a share ownership of the community, that you're growing your collective wealth as that community is growing. Or you could create both of those, forms of currency. What's really powerful then is if you have that equity-like token that represents ownership of the community. We're actually looking at local communities this way too. We wanted to say that the community as a whole owns all the land and buildings and everything, but that person gets to steward the house that they're living in.
Yeah.
Well, what represents this ownership, so to speak, or stewardship of that house is how many shares you're holding. So you own 1/20 of the community shares, so you're able to get one of the 20 houses that the community offers. And then instead of a title, which says you own that thing, and now you have those 20 shares or however many shares that says you owned that house. And then if you wanted to sell it, then you could sell your shares to somebody else and that they would buy that and then they would come in. But what's really cool is then they're able to store value into that, just like we can store value in the value of our houses today. So as the community is getting more valuable, more people want to join it, like, et cetera, people start realizing just how incredible of an opportunity living in community like this is. The value of those shares is going to go up, and then the community can start capturing some of that value. And at some point they could do really cool, like financial magic, where they, double your stock and you use that to raise capital to set up another one of the communities, So you can start doing like really interesting things when you start having these financial tools. And then when you get into a medium exchange currency, you can start looking at things like negative interest rate or taxation that's built into it, or fees to exchange with other systems, so that you could start generating some form of like tax revenue that the community can start allocating to help do community projects. And you can build that right into the monetary system. So I think it makes sense to first start off creating two different types of financial tokens, one that looks more like an equity, one looks more like a currency, and then designing them to be very, powerful in that particular case. I think we're missing out when we try to have one type of financial token that's supposed to do all of those things.
I'd love to hear your kind of feedback or thoughts on the idea of, really, so everything that we are doing with the local Earth villages is under the umbrella of the Earth 2.0 research project, and the 2.0 representing like the next evolution of all social and societal systems. So relooking at governance, economics, all these systems. And when you, as you were kind of alluding to, look at concepts of like ownership, land ownership, a very different paradigm than like land stewardship, cooperative land stewardship, where we as a group of 100 people or 150 people steward this land. We all own it, in legal terms together, but are really see it together as we collectively steward it. And that we don't own our house in the village, we're just part of the village. And as long as we are part of it and contributing, we continue to get to live in one of these beautiful homes in the village. And so to change like that 2.0 kind of research project, the social experiment, to get outside of the paradigm of fractional reserve-based banking, interest-based banking, here's a loan, it's going to take y'all, 30 years to pay it off with interest and this and this and that, of, the concept of finding there's, a lot of individuals on this planet that have a lot of financial abundance or land abundance that have been playing this current system and game and have like more than they know what to do with, and care a lot about the health of the planet and the environment. So it's like, let's say we find one of these individuals or a family that's like, here's our vision, here's our plan. We would love to have access to these, 110 acres of land to create this community, this social experiment. And, let's say it's valued at $1 million. They create some kind of fund that basically gives this $1 million loan to the community, but in land, not like dollar bills. And basically is hoping that this project succeeds and gives like 100-year no interest loan for this land. And if you break down that number of like what you'd have to pay back for $1 million, once a month over 100 years, it's a very small amount that a village could generate with businesses. And the hopes that family, that person's going to be passed away in 100 years, but it's going to go into their family trust of, that $1 million is paid back. And if not, like the default would be, this is into a trust. And if we aren't able to meet that loan in the 100 years, the land goes back to your grandchildren or like the family trust. So you have 100 years to kind of like play out this game, pay back the $1 million, and then you're free from this system of like interest and tax and this and that, of like you have the village truly has the land. And so I'm just curious your thoughts on like how we start to actually get the land for these communities that there's so many people around the world working on. And
yeah, so this is a really powerful conversation. How I came across Local Earth initially was 6 years ago. And back then, what I was really interested in, still deeply, deeply interested in, is local communities and eco-villages and intentional communities and all these things. Like actually what you're doing at Local Earth, incredible. But I came at it from a much more governance and economic side. So how do we create, value flows, and how do we do this, make decisions together as a collective and that sort of thing. So we actually created this framework called Our Neighbor Good, and it went into this like capital allocation and how all the different forms. So we get into like the 8 forms of capital and how people bring, land assets or their time capital or knowledge or financial capital or even tools and all this stuff, where we created a framework for capturing all of that value that was coming in and then delivered value out. And that was actually the equity token that we were designing. So that here's a really short and sweet example. Let's say you have a land project. It's $1 million for the land. So person A brings in $1 million worth of land. Person B brings in, $500,000 worth of tools and $500,000 worth of financial capital. Person C has no money or tools or anything at all, but they promise to bring in $1 million worth of time capital over 30 years or whatever. So everyone starts contributing different forms of capital to this project, and then it's mirrored by giving them all shares in it. When people's shares are in the future, like the person promising time, then they earn their shares every single week that they're actually following through with giving their time. So that over time, they become more of an equal partner, but their shares are sitting there, waiting to be earned by them. So what this does is it's then capturing all the value that's coming into the system. The person who's giving their land doesn't feel like they're getting the short end of the stick here. They immediately get this capital. And the collective energy that's going to that project is going to increase the value of that share that they got. So now they're making an investment with their land that's meant to go up in value, opposed to this 100-year loan. I mean, it's a cool model, but opposed to a 100-year loan that's slowly giving them a trickle of money. Today, there's way better options that they can do with that land where they can get way more money. So now they're having to take like the less sensible financial choice for the betterment of humanity. And what Seeds and all of these models is about is by making that no longer a distinction. We want to say the best financial decision also happens to be the best for people and planet. And that's what's going to create large scale transformation, is when those things align. And that's what we need to happen on the global level with Seeds, but also on the local level with things like Local Earth, is how do we make that just make so much sense that everyone's like, yes, duh, of course. Like, why would I sell my land when I could put it into one of these community trusts? Those things are the future, and look at all the value they're creating. Like, yes, I want to be a part of that. So yeah, I can actually send you a couple of these models and overviews that talk about this in great detail. And then I'd love to get your feedback on that.
Yeah, it's like it is time. Like how do we do it? Like, it's like we're ready. Like, I think there's lots of us fully ready to, put all of our time, focus, energy into it. And I'm one of those, and I know there's many of us on the planet that are ready to do this. So it's like, it's really like, all right, how do we do this? Like, how in this next 1 to 2 years do we start having the land to start building these regenerative communities?
Yeah, and fortunately for all the people who are entering into the game now, there's been communities and groups and people who have gotten into all the little nitty-gritty details of how to do it and made it really simple to be able to walk through that framework. So, we're standing on the shoulders of giants here, but yeah, it's a really fantastic time to be alive, because we get to just kind of step into it the later stages of the game, where we get to realize the stuff that people have been putting decades of energy and time into, hoping these things would come into reality, to actually be able to step into them and start living in them now.
Yeah. So what do you feel the timeline is for, because it's interesting, like, timing to be meeting you and learning about all this with Seeds right now. We've been working on the phase 1 kind of 2-year case study of our village project, and going from that Dunbar's number of 150 person kind of village scale design to the smallest kind of fractal of about 12 people being the max that can sit in a circle, see one another, hear one another, communicate, be heard. So we were kind of working on a concept of like 12 living clusters of 12 people, which would give you 144, 150 Dunbar's number. And all based on kind of that size of communication, how many people can sit in that circle, communicate. And so these 2 years were based on like what we'd call like one living cluster of 12 people, and how 12 people made decisions together, our governance. We all studied sociocracy and have using sociocracy as kind of our governance decision-making process. How we garden together, how we take care of the compost together, how we manage there's an orchard of 100 orange trees, you know, how we help take care of the soil for the trees. And we're just about complete with this 2-year project is completing on the spring equinox. And so these 2 years are done. And this case study is basically coming to close. And we're doing our visioning for what the next phase is going to be, which will be the land for a village of about 150 people. And so, like, I mean, it's just like we're right. The timelines are beautiful of like where it seems like Seeds is launching its kind of beta, and like we're really just like fully like, all right, we're building a team, and where are we going to build the village? And it'll just be really fun to see how we do this.
Yeah, it's hard to know time, and I'm so eager that I always underestimate how long it's going to take.
Yeah.
And it's also, you know, the time scale for it to fully distribute out, because I think, and I know the time that I'm going to be living in that and, you know, experiencing this new reality isn't when everyone's going to be able to experience it, right? So it takes time to like percolate out. But I mean, Seeds is, we have our public launch by the time people listen to this already. So the tool set's there, the basic tools necessary to like distribute value, start making decisions and governing sales, like that's all there. Seems like you guys are doing a lot on the social technology side of Local Earth, which is incredible, and why it's just perfect timing for us to meet up, because we've been doing a lot of work on the technological side of that, and building. So yeah, we're using sociocracy and holacracy into Hypha. That's actually where we framed the way of setting up the organization and governance systems within the tool set that we're building. So we're just giving you the technology to better do the governance that you've already been doing on a human level. And those things I think need to come together to really help scale happen, because technology helps us scale beyond 12 people. 12 people is incredible. Let's definitely have that human conversation too. Yeah. But how do we keep fractaling this up so that we can mirror it from 12 people to 144 in a village, and then 12 villages together to create like a municipality, you know? Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually where Seeds fits in, is it has these quote like municipalities, but we actually fractal it down into bioregions. And we say what's a community for us is a bioregion, which is a physical region of the earth. And why this is important is if we're talking about regeneration, you can't regenerate a river if you only are part of a fraction of that river. You need to have the whole, you know, river system in order to fully regenerate that river. Yeah. So that's why we make a local as it gets, is that. But that's with Seeds. So Seeds deals with those two scales, the global scale and the bioregion scale. But then Hypha and those tool sets and what you're doing with Local Earth come in to step into the smaller fractal community scales and your neighborhoods and your actual organizations and your businesses, etc. Yeah. I like that, because the word community can get thrown around in conversations, and I'm like, are you referring to the community of San Diego of 2 million people? Are you referring to the community of Encinitas of 60,000 people? Are you referring to the yoga community of 400 people? Are you referring to this intentional village of 18 people? Like, community can mean so many things. And I love the bioregional concept of community, because that's, from a political, like geopolitical standpoint, of like an arbitrary line in the sand between North Dakota and South Dakota and Mexico and the US, just, it's so arbitrary. But to take bioregions and watersheds, like that to me seems like the most practical and reasonable way to look at like the resources and the systems on this planet and communicate effectively to keep them healthy. Yeah, totally. And what just came to me too is that everything with Seeds, we want to follow biomimicry, which is the act of like mimicking our biological systems and being more attuned with our natural systems too. So, I mean, we talk about bioregions as how we're actually scaling local, but we want to do this on so many levels. We actually programmed lunar cycles to be our time cycle. So we needed a period that, one, wasn't biased towards any particular time zone. 2 was very fixed and constant. 3 had a metric for people to be aware of, like, oh, it's a full moon, that means it's this part of the cycle, and maybe I need to vote because it's the voting time, whatever. So we actually programmed in that our cycles, what we call, economic cycles, are all based on the lunar cycle. And just these little steps that we continue to make to like bring us back in tune with the natural cycles of our world, rather than these artificial ones that were fabricated at some point for some reason. Like, so.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I think some of the current calendar, a lot of it was based on a taxation system. I mean, that was where some of the current concepts of time and calendar were created. So like the empire or the government could tax the people. So there's interesting history to some of the current calendars, and whether we're basing it on solar cycles, whether we're basing it on lunar cycles. I mean, it's really beautiful to start tuning back into the natural rhythms. And I love how seeds, I mean, for one, the name seeds, and like just like tuning into lunar cycles, and just all of how deeply the nature can guide us if we listen to it and allow it to.
Yeah, and it gives us, and this is where it's fun, is it gives us the opportunity to reimagine all of these things. At some point, humans got together and reimagined the Gregorian calendar from what was currently being used, and that serves as the basis of that civilization we're all born into. But now we can reimagine it. We could say, that calendar sucks, let's use a better one. This financial current system sucks, let's use a better one.
Yep.
Like, we're all these systems that we're just born into that aren't really serving us anymore. Let's create alternatives, and we get to be part of that creative process. I mean, I don't like this. There's no more enjoyable thing I could see myself doing other than this. Like, what would I prefer to do other than like redesign the foundations of the systems that we're living in? Like, that sounds so enjoyable. And and it has been. I mean, it's driven me for 3 years. It's driven all the amazing people that keep showing up to this to like help drive it. Like, it's just been so fun. And that's what I'm saying. You brought up at the beginning, work, and it's so endemic in our culture that we're not working, and we actually have a very stern policy that if we find that we're doing something creative and we feel like it's work, or it's like draining our life, or we don't want to do it, we don't. We figure out how we automate it away, get rid of it. Oftentimes we realize it's not something we even needed. And we go back to doing that thing that's life fulfilling and creative and fun. Because what new paradigm are we building if we like torture ourselves to get there? Then we're just going to end up exactly where we started. We need to like get there living in that process, which is fun and creative and life fulfilling and purposeful and magical. And it's like, that's what life is. And we just forgot that that's what life is when we woke up in these weird systems. And we just need to step back into it and realize that, and build systems from that place of knowing and truth and magic. And then those systems will be imbued with that from their core. And yeah, it'll be really incredible.
I love that, like the concept of embodying like the consciousness and the energy and the intention that we're yearning, like that we are creating within these new systems. But if we're stressed out and miserable in the process of creating, that's going to like be infiltrated into the system. So, to be as like heart-centered and fully all chakras aligned as we're working on.
Yeah, right. And to understand that it is the process. I mean, I like using the analogy of kids playing in a sandbox. Like, they're in that sandbox playing and creating, not because they're trying to build like the epic city and they're working to like build this house to like put a roof over their head. No, they're in there because the process of playing in it is in itself fulfilling and fun. And you often see with kids, like once that process itself is no longer fun, they stop. They're not like, oh, we need to finish this, epic city that we're building. They're just like, this isn't fun anymore. We're going to like go do something else fun.
Yeah.
And that's where I want to like bring that back into humanity. Like, let's do it because it's fun. The process of creating itself is fulfilling and enjoyable. And that's where it is with seeds. Like, we're not saying like, we're only doing this because we need this. Like, that's a big driver of it. Yes, we need this. Like, I would love to be part of it. But the process itself of creating it has just been so fulfilling and enjoyable the whole way that, no, that's why I'm not really concerned with how long it actually takes to be realized, because the whole entire journey of realizing it is, all part of that.
Yeah. And what's your like estimate as to like how many people, like you said, you've been involved for about 3 or 4 years. Like, are we talking about a group of like 5 people that have been working closely together, or 50 people, like some people for 10 years, some people for 2 years? Like, what's kind of the social group that has been working on seeds in Hypha?
Well, people who have earned like significant stake is about 39.
Okay.
And how many years? That's a hard one, because again, we're building on top of old knowledge here. So some people have been, working in local currency systems for a decade or more. And do we say that, well, we're only capturing the 2 years they've been part of this project? Or do we say like, no, they've brought wisdom of 10 years. So, they've actually been working on this evolution for 10 years plus, but they just now started delivering that value towards seeds, So a long time, but the actual seeds, concept itself was brought out about 3.5, 4-ish years ago.
Okay.
And then from that time, about 39 people who have earned a lot of stake for having contributed to it. So that's what's really cool about seeds too, is that if anyone, or Hypha is actually the reality there. So those are people that are part of Hypha. Is that when people start hearing about seeds and like, yes, it's really cool, I want to contribute, then they can go to Hypha, go to that, we call it a DO, which is decentralized holonic organization. And they could show up and even request a role. So we've kind of mirrored it after holacracy or sociocracy, where there's roles that the organization needs, and then people just request to fill that role. And then the current members can vote on people to fill roles and not fill roles. So you can either show up and look for a role that might fit what your passion and purpose is and ask to fill one, or you can just make a one-time contribution and you can just have like a funding payout. Say like, I want to do this for seeds. I want to run an event. I want to add a piece of code. I want to do whatever, make a proposal. And if that proposal passes, you can get paid to do that.
Gotcha.
And that proposal passing process is fully decentralized and set up by all the members that are part of it. They get to have a vote, and their vote is based on how much they contribute. So that's actually a really important point I want to bring up, is a lot of decentralized organizations, or even our current organizations, are all basically oligarchies, which is governance by the wealthy. If I own 1 share, I get 1 vote. And since shares are sold on the open market, I can buy 1 million of them if I'm a millionaire, and I can have way more voice than the person who has 100,000, right? And since these systems were just designed to make more money, that made sense. Let's give more money to the people who have money. And what this inevitably does is it concentrates wealth. So the people who have money, they get all the decisions. They make decisions to give them more money. They can make more decisions, et cetera, et cetera. Follow this out with any time scale, we see the concentration of wealth. And they're not necessarily adding more value. So what we did technologically, and this is really, really important, is we actually separated the voice token from the equity token. So now if you own 1/10 of the equity, you get 1/10 of the claim on profits. But that's it. You put in money, like you got the equity token, you get money back out. But that doesn't give you more voice. So we've separated voice, and we say you earn voice through participating through a wide number of ways. So that we can make sure that the people who are governing it, that are voting it, that are making decisions, are the ones that are contributing the most, not just the ones that have the most money. Mm-hmm. And this is also a really important way of protecting ourselves from hostile takeovers, because if we're building these alternative systems and people who are extraordinarily wealthy in the old system don't necessarily like it, they could just come in, buy it all up, and shut it down. That doesn't make any sense at all. So we needed to make sure that it couldn't just be bought up and co-opted. And this is something that really no blockchain today is doing, or blockchain project is. They're all essentially governance by the wealthy. And really wealthy people can come in, co-opt them, and just do essentially what they want. And it's not really a practical design element here, especially given the stake that we're playing at.
I have a couple questions that came up while you were saying that. I'm trying to take a couple notes, as like sometimes like 3 or 4 things will come up into my mind, and like by the time we get finished talking, like there's one that's been floating around, but I can't remember it at this moment. But when you're talking about protecting from the hostile takeover, and one of like how the technology works, I guess one was just gonna highlight that the fun part of this renaissance right now is the tools and the technology that we have, like, are our governing systems of like a representative democracy or the Federal Reserve and how that was created, like, 200 years ago, like how society worked, like that was one thing, but now like we're in a completely different world. And so to keep using the kind of the old paradigm governance models and voting and representative democracy, like it's just fun to be like, wow, we actually have the tools that we don't need to slowly evolve this archaic system. We can just, create something that blows that out of the water just in efficiency and functionality and practicality. So that's like what's beautiful, seeing both with governance models and economic systems and currencies. But one of my questions is, so like, to run the blockchain, Holochain, the internet, these virtual platforms, there's fiber optic cables in the ground and there's satellites up in space, that we're all using to share this information. And those are, to my understanding, they're owned by large, they're corporations, whether it's Verizon or AT&T or a government or a military. So how do we kind of protect the systems that are being designed for seeds and all of these other kind of new paradigm systems that, as far as I understand, a lot of the internet is still, censored in like certain countries. You can't Google, I've heard things like in China, you can't search for certain things of, whether it's maybe the Dalai Lama or, that's all filtered. And so how does seeds and what y'all have been working on, like, deal with like who runs those channels of communication and satellites and all of that?
Sure. So Seeds isn't directly doing anything about that. Holochain actually is. They're building a decentralized internet. So that is what Holochain is. So Holo is a company behind Holochain, or an organization rather. But either way, what Holochain is, it has all these Holo hosting boxes. So everyone sets up their own like server essentially, and that's what runs this new internet on. So it's a peer-to-peer internet, which is really powerful. Second, there are some organizations putting up like satellite mesh networks over the globe to set up some global internet. So you can tap into them. You can do mesh networks on our phone where just we can emit Bluetooth or Wi-Fi signals from our phone ourselves, and then they connect with all the other phones, and they create this like mesh network of a new internet of sorts. You see that in Hong Kong when they tried to shut down their internet, they set up a mesh network to keep communicating. So anyway, there's a bunch of like technical workarounds that if our current internet gets too draconian, we can switch into something else. And there's a lot of projects working on the Web 3.0 new internet. So whatever one of those actually becomes successful at it, we can just port over to that. And that's what I initially was talking about with Holochain and how we would relate is I love that they're doing that. I support that. I bought my own Holo hosting box as well. And I'm all in favor of us setting up our own peer-to-peer internet. I think that's phenomenal and important. Seeds could potentially indirectly support that in the future by financing it. So some of the currency that we're growing can go towards creating and growing and amplifying these alternative internet models, if again we see that as necessary. But as it currently stands for the majority of the world, like we're pretty good with the internet that we have. So we'll use it until it's a problem, and then we'll fix it.
Yep. Cross that bridge when we come to it.
Yeah, right. If we try to take on everything at one point, and we find out we don't go anywhere, and then it just maintains itself as an idea. So we were already biting off so much as it was that I think we had to set our boundaries somewhere.
A global governance and economic system. That's a pretty good bite.
Yeah, we're like, we'll just leave it at that, And then Hypha was taking on a new organizational system. So it's like, it's so much already that we would much. And this is, foundational to another one of our policies is about collaboration. There's already projects out there that are doing every element this new civilization needs. The only problem is we're just not connected. We're not communicating with each other. We're not aligning. We're not collaborating. And that's what's key. So it's not important at all for Seeds to do every bit of it. What's really important is for us to all get connected so that we're all doing it. And then we're living in it. So
Yeah, and it feels like that's what like Seeds is helping create, that ecosystem, to realize there's tons of us working on all these pieces, and like now we can come together in the sandbox and play and have kind of some systems to help.
Yeah, and align our financial interest. So, I mean, that's a big driver today is financial interest. We just want to align that. So we find all these new paradigm projects, we give them some value that connects us all together. And then as we grow, we all share in that growth. And it's just, it's a system that we're just building out there so that we can start collaborating at scale.
And I loved in one of our prior conversations when we were talking, like the energy that I feel from you, and that there's no like part of this that's like we're trying to like necessarily revolt against like the current system or government, or I mean it is like providing revolutionary concepts and visionary ideas and solutions and technology. But like you and I were talking about like the situation at Standing Rock and like what the motives were behind like an oil company, and you know who's supporting the rights of that land or the environment, and if you know private security forces are brought in or the National Guard, like whose interests are being protected. And that none of this feels like confrontational of trying to like confront any government or company or this or that. It's just straight up like kind of Buckminster Fuller's, rather to create real change rather than fight against, you know, what exists, create the new models that make the old obsolete.
Absolutely.
Like it can be done in a very peaceful, loving way, and be like, we're not trying to like, you know, fight anybody. We're not trying to like, I mean, we are providing things to decentralize and redistribute things. And so some of those who have been accumulating, you know, vast amounts of, I guess, that power and wealth through their family connections for couple hundred years, like they, you know, I guess hopefully it's just like, hey, like let's just redistribute. There's abundance to go around.
This is why framing is so important, because they have lack too. Like, sure, they have a lot of digits in a computer, but they don't have community. They don't have trust. They engage with people who are inherently trying to take advantage of them. So they have this like state of always constant distrust. So, you know, human requires that comfort and that community and that tribalism and that bonding. They are severely lacking in that and just as depressed as everyone else.
Yeah.
So it's not about framing, hey, we're taking your value to give it to the poor. We're saying, hey, we're offering you this community. We're offering you this tribe. We're offering you this healthy world, this paradise, this Garden of Eden. Like, you know, and you're just going to be as wealthy, relatively speaking. Like Seeds is an invitation for everyone to step in. And if they bring in a lot of US dollars into the system, well, it gets mirrored back in Seeds and they can gain some benefit too. So it's an open invitation for everyone. And I think what's so important about that is we're not a revolution. And what happens with a revolution is it just revolves. It's the same paradigm, but there's a different people at the top, you know? And that's what every revolution is. It's like, hey, we're poor. We're tired of being poor. We want to be the rich for a while. So let's kill the rich. Now we're the rich. And, you know, and now there's a new poor class. It's like, no, that's what every revolution is. It's fighting against something. What we're saying is it's a renaissance, which is a paradigm shift, which involves all of us. And we have to see it as not like the 99% versus the 1%, but it's like this benefits everyone. We all benefit with a healthier planet. We all fail if our planet dies. Like there's not anyone on this earth, or at least not a human. I don't know about the alien things going on, but there's not a human on this earth that benefits from our planet dying, you know?
Yeah.
So I think if we start it from that point of view to say, this is better for all of us, full stop. Like here's a system that's, you know, everyone can earn a lot of value from, then I think it's a much more beautiful invitation than this idea of, you know, taking the 1% down or something.
Yeah. I just saw recently the announcements that like Jeff Bezos, I think, created that $10 billion Earth Fund. So it might be interesting to see how Seeds can play with that.
Well, so many things. So you look at Bitcoin, man, it's had like a 500 billion market cap at one point. It's like 250 billion or something right now. So what Bitcoin did in a matter of 10 years was to create $250 billion worth of wealth. It's just a matter of how it was distributed. And each year, as I was pointing out, like 3 billion was going to just electricity fees.
Yeah.
And you look at Bitcoin and its adoption, how many people actually use it as a form of currency, it's pathetic. Like its actual adoption is paltry. Sure, a lot of people are using it as an investment vehicle. But my point here is when you're talking about creating alternative financial systems, the scales we're dealing with is massive. We get to just the adoption Bitcoin has, and we were able to generate $250 billion worth of value that we got to direct towards, regenerating our planet, to, financing healthier businesses and organizations, etc. So you look at Jeff Bezos's 10 billion, it's like, yeah, that's great. But, Bitcoin did 25 times that in a decade. So it sounds like big numbers, but we're playing at a totally different scale here. And the level of transformation that could happen with creating a different financial system is, unprecedented.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the extremely inspiring conversation, brother.
Yeah, likewise. It took a while for my brain to wake up. It's earlier here for me.
I know we're different time zones. Like the sun's gone down here, and so we've been talking. You're just picking
morning's coming up here, so yeah.
Sun's rising. Cool. Well, I'm super grateful for you spending the time with me in this, and the work that you have all been doing with seeds. Just our planet is so I'm really grateful that you've been doing such great work for this whole planet.
Gratitude mirrored, and we'd love to deliver some of this value to you and anyone else listening to this that has a project or organization that wants to plug into this whole thing. I'll give you some links that you can share into this that people can dive into to get a hold of that. And like I said, we're also launching that passport. So it's an app. We call it a passport because it's like a portal into this new civilization. So it's got all these really cool features. Let's just go check it out. You'll like it. You can see it at joinseeds.com. And
so that's like the call to action. I definitely want to leave people with that, and I'll provide any necessary links when we share this virtually in the social media virtual world, so people can sign up for the passport. And then I think you also said that, there's the grants kind of process. You're creating the kind of the partnership alliances. So there's lots of ways that people can engage right now, huh?
100%. Yeah. Whatever your passion is, whatever your purpose is, it fits into this new civilization. So anyone can show up to this and add value and get that value mirrored back. So.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I look forward to continuing to play in the coming weeks and months and years. And I know you and I've already talked about, we have some upcoming local Earth events, and we're going to explore how the campaigns and all of that work. So we're going to be stepping in to explore that process right now, in these next couple weeks and months. Or that. And then, as this goes on, maybe we can continue to do version 2.0 of this conversation or something. Cause I think this is, we covered a lot in about an hour and a half or something, but this is going to continue to grow. So, maybe every couple months we can reschedule another one of these and kind of talk about the evolution of the process.
Yeah, totally. And we could even speak a little bit more towards local Earth and creating different token economic models for intentional communities.
Yeah. I like that with these visionary solutions discussions. I love this kind of conversation and discussion, but I'd love to start maybe creating these relationships through these discussion series where we're starting projects and continuing to revisit them and talk about how we're actually implementing these concepts and technologies and all of that. So
to make it very practical. Love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Brother. Well, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. It's always interesting when you're in a whole different time for me. So I want to say how's tomorrow? How's Wednesday?
I can tell you, I'm living in the future, and it's beautiful.
Beautiful. Awesome. All right, brother. Well, have a great day. And, we'll be in touch soon.
Cheers. Talk soon.
Right.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Local Earth Discussion Series. If you enjoyed the information in this discussion, please share it with your friends, family, and colleagues all around the world. As mentioned earlier, we are a nonprofit organization that operates primarily on contributions from our Patreon members and donations. Please consider becoming a Local Earth Patreon member. Membership begins as low as $1 per month. This has been brought to you in partnership with the Solar Energy Alliance. There is a link in the description below for a free solar proposal for your home and information about how to become a partner or ambassador with the Alliance. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. Please check out our YouTube channel or Facebook page for other discussions in the series. Wishing you a beautiful day. Aloha.